I have to tell you, in all my years of covering trials, this is as close as I've ever seen a judge come to calling witnesses liars when giving his reasons for his ruling at the end of the day. That is pretty much what he did today when he said these women's testimony, the witnesses who testified against Jian Ghomeshi, were in the end not believable enough to carry a conviction. Now, this isn't to say, he said, that he didn't believe something didn't happen, just that they were not credible. And there were very specific instances where the credibility proved to be difficult. For instance, he used as an example, one of the witnesses talked about a specific car that she said Ghomeshi had owned. A very important fact, because this is apparently where one of the assaults was said to have taken place. She said her hair was pulled by Ghomeshi, that he struck her in the vehicle. She got the type of vehicle wrong, and the judge said, and very specifically calling it a love bug, one of those Disney-type vehicles. The judge said getting that wrong when she got so many other specifics right in her testimony called her credibility into question, and meant it was very difficult to believe the other things. Then he moved on to the other witnesses, Lucy de Cotter. He said it was very difficult to believe that she would not have told the police or prosecutors about trying to continue a relationship with Jian Ghomeshi long after the assault was said to have taken place, including sending him that handwritten letter saying, "I love your hands." He said he could understand a witness being unwilling to talk about something like this, having great difficulty, but in the end, when she is asked over and over again by prosecutors, by the police, have you had any further contact with Jian Ghomeshi, to have deleted all of this from her statements, he said simply made her unbelievable. And of course, the third witness, he said, was playing chicken with justice. She had held so much information back from prosecutors. In the end, he said there was no way a conviction could carry, and Jian Ghomeshi was found not guilty on all of the charges facing him here today.
Okay, tell us about the reaction, some of it very dramatic so far.
Well, it was a very interesting day after, as if it wasn't interesting enough with the ruling itself, but afterward, what played out on the front steps of the old City Hall, the landmark courthouse here in downtown Toronto, was really quite breathtaking. We were waiting to see which among the witnesses might come out to talk to us, whether Jian Ghomeshi would have something to say or his lawyer. In the end, they did not. They left by a back entrance, as was their right. They had permission from the judge to use that entrance throughout the trial, and there were literally dozens of protesters on the front steps, screaming, carrying signs, saying, "We believe her. Ghomeshi is not an isolated incident." The kind of protesters that have been around for most of this trial, this apparently was their big day. They showed up, and some of them told me they were really anxious to confront Ghomeshi directly with their support of the witnesses. When Michael Callahan, the Crown prosecutor in this case, the Crown attorney, came out to speak with reporters, everything sort of collided, the protest and his statement. Take a look.
We just received the judgment. We're going to have a chance over the long weekend to take a look at it, consider our position. But that's all we have to say today. I just wanted to be clear that, obviously we're considering the judgment. We're in the appeal period. So, yeah.
Now, Carol, I can tell you that many lawyers who were here looking at this said they'd never seen anything like that. A Crown attorney, while speaking with media, is being accosted like that. Our colleagues at Radio Canada have since identified this person and said she's part of a group called Femmes Quebec. They protest quite frequently in Montreal and in Quebec, and now their protest has moved here as well. Now, not everybody here was here today to say bad things about Jian Ghomeshi. Members of his family have been with him. His mother especially has been with him through much of the trial. He can be seen often giving kind of a sheepish grin to her as trial days began. Today, one of the Ghomeshi family members, his sister Gila, spoke to reporters. A daunting prospect for somebody not used to media exposure, a phalanx of cameras around her, sometimes 2 and 3 levels of them, and here's what she had to say.
My mother and I love Jian very much. Our hardest burden has been our feeling of helplessness as we have watched him endure a punishment that was delivered not only prior to a verdict, but prior to any semblance of due process for well over a year. It has been extremely painful for those of us who love him. Jian has, however, remained the person that we know and love. We hope that Jian and our family will be given the privacy and dignity to slowly heal from a process that has been extremely difficult.
Jian Ghomeshi, a very public figure in this country, but his family are not. They are very private people, and they are again asking for privacy in the wake of these rulings. I talked with one of the other witnesses in this case, Lucy de Cotter, who has, of course, given media interviews to the CBC before. As she walked by, we were expecting her to come to the microphones, perhaps have a word with us. She walked by with really only one word to say. The police who were shoving us out of the way as she tried to make her way across the street accidentally shoved me into her path. And so I asked her, what do you have to say in the wake of all of this? She just smiled and said thanks, and then moved across a crosswalk here, a kind of Canadian moment, I must say, surrounded by cameras as she walked. They waited for the Don't Walk sign on Queen Street to turn to walk before they all moved as one across the street. There were some interesting things we were trying to hear before that protester jumped in about whether there would be an appeal of this from Crown Attorney Michael Callahan. As yet, we do not know. We still believe the trial in the summer will be going ahead. And we heard from one other person today, the lawyer for one of the witnesses. Each of the witnesses in this case have had their own separate counsel. They say to make sure the system doesn't really steamroller them over. Some of them today felt they have not been well treated. Here is the lawyer for the first complainant in this case, and here's what he had to say.
I am disappointed that His Honor did not note in the decision that I was mostly unchallenged about the substantive allegation. I hope that my coming forward and sharing what happened to me gives strength to other victims of sexual assault. I encourage anyone who is a victim of abuse to come forward, seek assistance, and not be afraid of what may happen.
Here we go. This is something that a couple of the witnesses have been saying throughout this trial process and publicly before the trial began, that no matter what happened here today, they wanted to make sure that it didn't do anything to stop victims of sexual assault from coming forward in other incidents. But what happened here today was a complete acquittal, for a big win for the defense.
All right, so we don't know if there will appeal yet, as we just heard from the clip from the lawyer, the Crown prosecutor. They're going to take the weekend at least to figure that out. They've got 30 days, and there's one more trial coming. Any other indication of what life is going to be like in the next chapter for Jian Ghomeshi?
Well, it's difficult to know if he can get his own life back. It's difficult to imagine he could become the radio star that he once was. I think there's sort of two things going on at once. As we wait to see the last part of the criminal prosecution of Jian Ghomeshi take place perhaps in the summer, there is also this whole sort of social conversation that is going on around him. I talked with several lawyers today about whether this might actually change the way sexual assault cases are done in Canada, whether they're moved forward. They're not so sure. There were signs here from people who were protesting saying this was a travesty of justice. Some lawyers say what happened here in this case is exactly what trials are supposed to do. A case is put before a judge or a jury, there is cross-examination, evidence is tested, sometimes quite severely, and then the truth begins to come to the surface. A judge or jury can make a decision. That is certainly what is happening here. I'm told that this case is practically a template for what happens right now in cases all across the country. It happens almost every week in courtrooms in this country. Just there aren't throngs of media watching, that these cases of accusations of sexual assault tend to fall apart. It's a very difficult conviction to get. It isn't clear if there can be anything done about the belief of witnesses when they first come in. The police and the Crown are facing some criticism for not doing more digging into this. It isn't clear if that part of the process will change as well, given that so much effort was put into making victims believe when they first report. It isn't clear what this trial will do to it, but it can't be good for it.
All right, the CBC's James Murray outside the courthouse in Toronto.